Hello, I'm Dale Tovar. I'm a music theory major at Eastern Oregon University. I'm applying for the Davidson Fellowship, and I've submitted a portfolio of 3 works. The first one is, the subject is octotonicism and interval cycles in Benjamin Britten's Nocturnal after John Dowland. Now, most of what my research involves is the study of post-tonal and atonal music. It's really not well understood because it lacks, a key signature. It lacks, for the most part, prolongation structure and triads, all things that even your most, unfamiliar listener really understands. So that's a lot of what I'm doing, is trying to show to society, how they can understand this piece, how both the performer and the listener can enjoy and try to understand how this music is organized. So the topic of that one is all about interval cycles and how it helps move between octotonic collections. It's comprised of 2 object families that I use for different transformations. Transformational theory is a big part of most atonal music analysis, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm employing 2 different transformational theories here in order to demonstrate both the interval cycles and as well as the octotonic collections. The next one down is a tonal problem analysis in Berg's Opus 3, which is another atonal piece. So what I'm trying to do there, tonal problem analysis, is a tonal theory, but what it demonstrates is it's a narrative that shows from the beginning of the piece to the end there's some sort of problem and it's resolved throughout the piece. So what I'm trying to do is put this in terms of an atonal context, and that involves the ideal state, that perfection in that sense is a whole tone collection, and the disruption is pitches or pitch classes from the complementary whole tone collection. And the last work that I've submitted here it's kind of the basis of my thesis that I've been working on, which involves voice leading in atonal music. So a lot of this got started when I went to University of Utah and worked with Bruce Quaglia. And we worked on that first paper. That was the topic for the first semester, was the octotonicism and interval cycles. When I got done, he suggested that I submit to the West Coast Conference of Music Theory and Analysis. So that was the next term. And that next term, before I went to the conference, that's when I began working on the tonal problem analysis. So while at the conference, I had a really nice time. I presented for 15 minutes on it. I got a lot of good feedback on it. I got a lot of good suggestions to go from there. And one of the things I learned about a lot during that conference was I went to a certain session from another student at the University of Utah. He was a PhD student, and after his presentation, which I didn't understand very well, I tracked him down and we had lunch a few times, and I asked him, what are Klompenhauer networks, because that's what was such a big part of his work. So he explained, he gave me some articles to read, and I read them, and then we met up and we talked about it, and I began to understand what he was talking about. So when I went home, I kind of went nuts reading about Klompenhauer networks. I read a ton about them, and I read like 20 articles. And near that time, I came across a pretty controversial article by Michael Buckler called Reconsidering Klompenhauer Networks. And he raised a lot of issues with the matter, and I was battling, I've read all about this, is it useful, is it not? And I couldn't really understand. So the next thing I did was, after I kept reading about them and trying to decide what was useful and what maybe not, was I came across an article on axial isography, and it used for one of its examples Berg's Opus 3, which was a piece I already knew a lot about from my tonal problem analysis. So what I did then was I think this is a pretty valid theory to some extent. So I thought about that would be what I would want to write about next. But after a lot of thinking, I began to wonder whether that's not really what I wanted to demonstrate, that the analysis presented with Klumpenhauer networks wasn't actually exactly what I wanted to show in the piece. It was close, but not really exactly what I wanted to demonstrate. So that got me onto reading a lot about voice leading. That was really my interest there. So I started reading a lot: Joe Strauss, Sean O'Donnell, John Roeder, David Lewin, and even plenty of Henry Klumpenhauer. More of Michael Buckler, Catherine Losada. I kind of really got into it. So from there, I kind of saw two problems, and that's where a lot of the work for my thesis came. The first was that voice and voice leading is something very poorly understood within the theory community, in that there's a lot of different ideas of what constitutes voice and voice leading. You know, some people think of it as a mathematical, mapping. Other thinks of as a pitch series, other a pitch class series. So one of the things I wanted to do was I kind of wanted to get at the roots and what's the most useful. What are we trying to get at when we're looking at voice and voice leading analyses? So part of my method involves not just looking at one idea of what a voice is, but multiple. So what I did from there was I read a lot more again, but
Hello? Hi, Jay.
the next thing that I had to deal with, the next problem that I had to address, was the idea of structure, because we have strong ideas from tonal music about what structure is. We understand prolongation, we understand metrical structure, all is sort of one thing. And what I found out in atonal music is, as a lot of these things fall apart, you have to kind of compensate for it. So what I'm trying to address in my thesis is not only that there's a lot of understandings of what voice is, but we can't do the same things for identifying structure that we can in tonal music. We understand hierarchical structure in tonal music, and I think a lot of the things that align in tonal music are misaligned in atonal music. A lot of the pitch structure is not as closely organized with the metrical or rhythmic structure or formal structure that we understand it to be in tonal music. So what I tried to do is not only unite harmonic voice leading, but kind of long-term middle ground voice leading, uniting our ideas of voice and structure. Oh, that's another thing. With voice leading analyses, we kind of get two kinds. We kind of get longer spans, and we get between harmonies. It's kind of an inconsistency there. So my method examines both between harmonies and between melodies and motives and longer spans. There we get an idea of both formal structure, overall harmonic structure, as well as the individual motions among each voice, whether it's a pitch class voice or a pitch voice. So what I'd really like to say is that music and atonal music is a big part of my life, and society doesn't really well understand a lot of these things, and I wouldn't say it's misunderstood, just not understood at all, a lot of these musics. So what my method is trying to do is not only show that it's really interesting, but show to the performer and to the listener what kind of things they can get from hearing it in this way. Thank you.